The Catholics of Oz is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to episode 79 of The Catholics of Oz. The Catholics of Oz is a show where we discuss faith, culture, and what's been happening from an Aussie perspective. Whether it's synods or science, apostolate synapse, providence or productivity, you can hear it right now on The Catholics of Oz. Hello and welcome, I'm Lindsay Sant. Welcome to episode 79 of The Catholics of Oz. It's been a while. We have reasons. We'll talk about that soon. But before I do, Caroline Knight, welcome back to The Catholics of Oz. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well, a little bit cold, but okay, thanks.
Yes, but not as cold as you were about a week ago, is that right?
Yes, I was even colder in the cold Zealand.
Cold Zealand.
In the southern lands of New Zealand, yes.
Yes, all right. And also joining us.
So worth it.
Lino Sabol. Lino, how are you?
I'm good, guys. I'm good. Great to see you back, Caroline. Safe and sound.
Yes.
Thank you. Nice to be back with you guys.
Yeah. It's been such a long time. I think the last time we were together, we were doing one, and then one of our files was gone, and then it's one of those hidden episodes that no one will never listen to.
No one will ever hear it because a third of it doesn't exist.
I know. Somebody could have found it on the internet somewhere. How did they do that? I don't know. Hey.
Yeah, no, nothing's going to save that audio recording that disappeared. Yes. So let's explain what's going on here. So we were obviously meant to record and have an episode come out recently, the actual episode 79, and that didn't happen. Now, it's not Caroline's fault. Caroline was in New Zealand. We knew that. We were prepared for that. That was all good. Hope you enjoyed New Zealand, by the way, Caroline.
It did, thank you. I mean, after 2.5 years of being locked down and not allowed to go anywhere, and usually we'd go every year to see my husband's family and his parents and everything. So it was long overdue, but it was really, really, really good to go back and see everyone and spend time over there. Yeah.
Any highlights?
Oh, where do I start? I mean...
Hey! Now calm down, it's only 1 hour podcast, all right?
Just advertise New Zealand to everyone.
I mean, definitely catching up with everyone again was the best thing about it. And, you know, I love the outdoors in New Zealand. There's nothing like it. I mean, maybe there is something like it, but there's nothing like the actual being in New Zealand and going out in the bush and, you know, just walking by the wild waterfalls and the wild, you know, everything, and seeing the birds and just being out in nature is my most favorite thing when I go over there. And then obviously the boys always want to try every single mode of transport they can find. So we went on the train, we went on the trolley, what was it called? The, oh my goodness, now I'm forgetting what it's called. But everything that there was, we went on it. The cable car in Wellington. Wellington's known quite well for its cable car. Double-decker buses they've got just as, you know, usual transport. And we took a really nice long train ride. It was a 45-minute train one way and then 45 the other way up. We went to Upper Hutt, but Upper Hutt is, I mean, it's just a normal city, little town, but the ride itself was the nice part of it because you go by the water and, you know, then you see the different scenery change as you go up. So the boys really enjoyed that as well. So yeah, really fun. It was great. There's a lot more I could talk about, but those are the things that come to mind.
No, that's really good. I mean, I have to ask you because it's the cliched question, but did you find any hobbits at all? Or?
Oh, everyone's a hobbit over there. No. I tell you, they're more relaxed than the average Melburnian, that's for sure.
Yes. Well, true.
That is more true. Of a relaxed life, and lots of, you know, the sheep and the goats and the cows are the happiest that I've ever seen in my life. Like, you know, here in Australia, they're out in the, I don't know why they put them out in the dust sort of, and they're like, oh, I need water. And those were the fat, happy sheep, and everybody at New Zealand, they're like, yay, I'm in grass all the time. Yay, grass, you know, and it's like green and they're by the water and they're, you know, they're just having a great old time. So, yeah.
And don't we all just want to be fat, happy sheep in life?
I know, it's true. It is true. And then they've got like little like goats everywhere, and they're like little mountain goats because they're all
Whoa,
just scaling the cliffs and stuff. I'm like, oh
Love
my
it.
goodness. Yeah. So they're very happy animals in New Zealand.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get to the real reason. I feel like I have to keep talking about things that are my fault on this podcast. So we had skipped an episode at one point. So we had a bit like was it before June was a bad month for this podcast. I'm just going to say that.
I think we struggled. I think we got to halfway through the year and just struggled. Like winter hit, we got a bit unwell. We just all got super busy all of a sudden.
Nuts. Yeah, it's nuts. You guys, it's nuts.
We took a mini break in June for one episode because you and I, especially Caroline, we had been super busy, so we thought we'd just put Lino on the sidelines and have a break. So if people don't know, when we don't podcast, we actually just put Lino in a box, and then when it's time, and then every second Saturday when it's time to podcast, Lino just pops out and he's ready to go.
He's all happy. He had a good rest.
He's ready to go. Yeah. Yeah, so Lino...
Jack in the box. Jack in the box.
Yeah, so poor Lino got stuck in a box for a month because... So then we had the mishap where we alluded to before, where I didn't record properly. I'd spoken about that in our last episode. And then our last episode was meant to be 2 weeks ago, but nothing happened because... I had COVID for a second time.
Oh no! I think it was the second bout, wasn't it, Lindsay?
Second bout of COVID.
Yeah.
So I copped another one. Now, thankfully, COVID 2 was mild. Like it wasn't as bad as Caroline. You remember Caroline January? Because you and I had it at the same time.
That COVID we had in January was awful. Just flattened us.
Not fun. It
was terrible. No.
The second bout of COVID, it was mild. The worst. Well, I wouldn't even say worst, but the strongest thing I think was just the tiredness that came along with it, and the mental fuzziness was not fun.
Definitely.
So I was able to. Thankfully, I was able to work from home. So
good.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't teach any of my classes, obviously, but I could do other work. So, and I had a lot to do. I think I was busier when I was working from home than when I actually work at school. So, anyway, so I was able to do that, thankfully, and I'm just grateful that my workplace, my school is really supportive when things like this come about, and so I was. People kept in touch with me, made sure I was all right. If people were patient with me when I was reaching out for information that I would normally have at the drop of a hat, if I was there on site. So, so thankfully I got through all of that. And the other thing is so term 2 just finished. For those listening, at time of recording, I'm on school holidays at the moment right now, mid-year break. I was preparing the Year 11 retreat with another colleague, with a couple of colleagues. We were getting that ready, and that's a big project, getting the Year 11 retreats up and running.
Year 11,
because we have 8. It's like running 8 separate retreats because we have all of our 8 houses go to 8 separate venues, which is it's hard work, but it's a really good experience for them. The reason we do it this way is because it's such a rewarding experience in the way that we've got it set up. And I was meant to go for the whole week. So we had, some retreats in the first 3 days of the week, and then other retreats in the, that swap over on that third day and go to the second half of the week. So I was meant to go for the whole week and do retreats and support one. And then because of COVID, I couldn't go and I was just racked with guilt. So my team were like, "It's okay, don't worry." And I'm at home doing this, that whole FOMO thing. So and I really, really, really wanted to make sure I got to this retreat, the second one, so I was able to go, and I just gave it everything, to be honest. I after missing out on the first,
you can do, man.
And that's it. And I was tired for most of it, and the head of house there was kind enough to let me disappear and have little naps where there were little breaks every now and then.
That's so good.
And that helped. But it was a really good experience overall, and the students were beautiful. The staff who supported were great. So it was great to, at least after all the disasters of COVID and everything else, finish the term on a high, and go into the school holidays completely drained of any energy or mental energy. And it's good. That means you've done everything you possibly can, and then get some rest. So that's it. In the anyway, that's my long way of saying that's why we didn't have a podcast. So yeah. So essentially it was my fault. Yeah. So, but we're back. Here we are. Here we are. We're back. Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah,
things happen.
That's right. Caroline was talking about the travel, and I had to drop off Mum to the airport, and he had to get because she's going to Sydney for like 2 weeks, I hope, 3 weeks. Oh, I'm so hopeless at times like that. And she'll be back. I know she's be back in the 21st of July. So I got to.
As long as you know when to pick her up from the airport, that's the key thing.
That's right. That's right. So and I looked at it and I went, oh, yeah, that travel bug is slowly coming back to me.
Yeah.
2 years of missing that. Yeah, Caroline, you get, it was so good to come back and do that.
Yeah. No, once you go, that's like, you want to go. Yeah. However, it's harder to travel now because, especially if you're going overseas, we had to fill in a traveller declaration to go to New Zealand plus get a negative PCR test, which now they've scrapped, but, we were lucky enough to be able to get it. Oh, no, they're scrapping it at the end of July.
Okay.
And then now to get back to Australia, you also have to fill in a traveller declaration as well, but without a test. And then when you fly, you hope that your plane is on time, and then you hope that your bags will get there and that you don't have to wait an hour and a half for your bags once you get there. And you hope that your plane is stocked with enough food for everybody on the plane.
That problem, didn't you? Yeah, goodness.
So we had a few glitches on the way back. This due to short staff and COVID and everything else, but it doesn't matter. I mean, you, these are just little things. You just get through them, but it's so worth it to do it. So
sounds like Qantas is learning how to do international travel again. Wait, where's the plane? What's this? What's these buttons?
Everything.
People have bags. What?
There were so many little things that now the plane was a bit. I don't know. The sound wasn't working on some of the little TVs in front of the, the back of the seat that you watch. Yeah. And it's like, I can't just watch a mime, it's like, it's a long flight, 3.5 hours. It's not like you could just have a nap and wake up or whatever. And, anyway.
So you have to watch a movie or TV series and just make up the dialogue on your own.
Yeah.
Is it kippers for breakfast, Aunt Helga? That's a Simpsons joke for anyone who knows what I'm talking about.
The St. Smithens Day.
Yes.
Anyway.
I must admit, when I was at the airport, wow, there was a lot of people going to Thailand. Well, it says Bangkok, but of course everyone in the Thailand. I was like, wow, people are slowly coming back to it, going back to traveling. Yeah, it's good. And it's it's quite great for the economy and people trying to get away and just have some fun. We've been, like I said, 2 years of been in Australia for. We go out anywhere that much. We couldn't even go to the borders. We
couldn't go 5 kilometres past 5 kilometres at one point.
Exactly.
It's just exciting to be able to go to Dandenong
extreme
or something.
Quarantine. Actually, should make a series, Extreme Quarantine, Victoria style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We weren't even sure if we were allowed to go that park or that park. I mean, it's
yes,
because of a kilometre different. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. But it's great. Things are coming back.
I needed a permit to go to work, which was 10 minutes away.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Anyway.
Crazy times we live through when you think about it now, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's great. We're still going to get back to it, And, it's great. Most importantly, we're able to get to.
You know what, though? When we went to New Zealand, the mask rule was still in place for indoors. I had to get used to everything came rushing back when I had to put these masks on. And that's why all the experience of the lockdown just came back to me. Like, my goodness, we've gone back in time here.
Oh, well, at least you're sort of prepared, yeah?
Well, we took masks with us, luckily.
And we know procedures and stuff. We know we all do it, especially as Victorians.
Yeah. And then when we came home and I went into the shopping centre without a mask, I was like, well, I feel a bit guilty here. I'm not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. As everyone who's listening can hear, we have a lot to get off our chest. So
that's what happens when we don't podcast for a while.
And we'll see each other soon. We'll see each other soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, so before we continue, if you're new to listening to the Catholics of Oz, if you happen to stumble upon this episode after us not producing for a while, welcome. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or your favorite podcast player. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating. Just for the banter alone, it's worth the 5 stars, I reckon. And some positive feedback so that we can hear from you. We'd love to hear from you. And also so that we can reach new people. SQPN SQPN also hosts all of its shows, including the Catholics of Oz, on YouTube. So just search SQPN on YouTube and subscribe there and hit the bell to get notifications when new episodes are released. Now, before we continue, Caroline and Lino, I actually have some listener feedback to share with us. So I might just throw some things out. So
Go for it.
First of all, Vivian on Facebook, this was her response to our previous episode, and this was the one where, Lino, you and I spoke about John Paul II's visit to Australia. This was the episode that we recorded a second time after the first glitch.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I remember talking about that and it didn't make the cut.
Yeah, so Caroline was originally part of the episode, and so we have a hidden Caroline recording. Yeah.
Just gone to this.
It's on my computer somewhere.
Yes.
I think
Just
it's
my
gone.
voice.
My one's gone. I had to reformat with hard disk.
It's just Caroline speaking on her own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
So Vivian, first of all, Vivian, thank you so much, because she's communicated a couple of times on our Catholics of Oz Facebook group, and on that episode she said, another fun and educational episode. Also relieved to hear it was just a technology failure that led to a missed episode. So yeah, we were relieved also, Vivian, that we were able to bounce back from that. And also, Vivian, I just want to thank you personally as well. Thank you so much for your kind words when I mentioned that we didn't have an episode because I had COVID. So thank you for reaching out and with your message. So it was received and greatly appreciated. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing this one properly, but this is Jörg, who sent an email to us, which is catholicsofoz@sqpn.com. So he said the following: thanks for an excellent podcast, which we can relate to here in Oz. I'm a recent convert being received into the church at Easter Vigil this year. I'm from a Protestant background and now happy to have arrived home. My parish is St. Agatha's in Cranbourne, and I believe you guys are from Holy Family Dufton. Yes, we are. I've visited your church a few times, especially for the healing mass on Sunday nights when Father Michael Peapilli was there. And then he said the following: what are your thoughts on how to integrate into my new Catholic family? I find Cranbourne big, and to find the right group to fit into with not many English-speaking men's group or Bible study groups. I know it's early days, but miss that kind of fellowship which Protestant groups do well. I should mention I am 60 years old and originally from South Africa via New Zealand. There you go, Caroline. There's a connection there. And appreciate your thoughts, and thanks and God bless. So thank you so much, Jörg. So I did reply with an email to Jörg as well with my thoughts on that, on his questions about integrating better into the Catholic family. In terms of men's ministries, I mentioned two bits of feedback. One I said is check with your parish priest, see if there's something that's there, or if the priest is hearing that there are a lot of parishioners, who want a men's ministry, like a men's group or something, or a women's group, or whatever kind of group it might be. Speak to your parish priest for two reasons. One, because your priest might see in you that desire and then encourage you to start something and link you up with people that will help you to start something. That's a possibility there. Or this might be the prompt for the priest to go, I think we need that too. Let's look at putting something together. That's also possible. And the other thing I mentioned as well is outside of parishes, there's Lino, you'll remember this, Men Alive. Is an Australian Catholic men's ministry which started because the founder of it went to Archbishop Mark Coleridge and said, you need to start a ministry for men. And Archbishop Mark Coleridge said, no, you need to start a ministry for men. And Men Alive was born from that. And they do different conferences and they do parish retreats as well. We had one, oh gosh, how many years ago was it now? I forgot, maybe a decade ago. Either way, it was a very impactful weekend for us. And, the reason is, that this men's ministry exists is because the person who founded it had noticed that, that women were really active in the church, in his parish, in the churches that he saw, and he said, that's really good. But what about the men? Why aren't they as active? Why are they quiet? Why aren't they also, in partnership, also participating in the life of their parishes as well? So this was to encourage men to get more active in their faith as well, to find ways to express their faith in their parishes and in the wider church. So Men Alive is another great one here in Australia for anyone who is looking for that. They're on Facebook. You can Google them. They're easy to find. So that was my little bit of advice there. I've got two more as well, so I'll just share those really briefly. This was from Glacius on Discord. This was also about our last episode. Thanks for this episode. I've been thinking recently about John Paul II's meeting with Australia's Aboriginal representatives, and the part Lindsay quoted at the end about the church lacking something until Indigenous people are fully participating is very important and in a way encouraging to hear. I think it was prophetic too. I crossed paths with an Indigenous deacon in North Queensland some years ago when doing youth work, and he was a great bloke. To recontextualise the title of John Paul II's encyclical letter, Ut Unum Sint, and I hope I pronounced that properly, or that they may be one. Glacius, I agree 100% on that point. And lastly, from Yajin Yuan on Discord as well, South Australia is great. Thanks for the comment. I'm sure it is.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. South Australia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So want to thank you all for your feedback. Really appreciate that. And you can leave us feedback on our Facebook page, Catholics of Oz. What is it? Facebook.com/Catholics of Oz, or on Discord, or flick us an email, or reach out anyway. You know, if you know us personally, just you can do that too. We're happy to talk about it. Yeah. All right. So with all of that out of the way, let's get some content. So let's start with Faith Beyond Borders.
Well, I'm actually feeling rather good about this. I think we've all arrived at a very special place, eh? Spiritually, ecumenically.
How do you make somebody love you without affecting free will?
Welcome to my world, son. You come up with an answer to that one, you let me know.
Yes, I had to work very hard to pass Latin and theology.
Oh, quite. Those are, of course, the most important things.
Oh, yeah.
I'd sit this one out, Cap.
I don't see how I can.
These guys come from legend. They're basically gods.
There's only one God, man. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
So, Caroline and Lino, the topic I wanted to share today was a new letter to the church, to the whole church community from Pope Francis. And it's all about the liturgy and our love for the liturgy and our participation and our understanding of it as well. Now, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the title because I'm going to struggle with it. However, it's based on the Gospel of Luke and from chapter 22, when Jesus starts the Passover and he says, "I've earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." So Pope Francis makes that the theme. And it's his linking of the Passover or the Last Supper of Jesus with the liturgy as well. So this letter is about 65 paragraphs long. So I'm obviously not going to read all 65 paragraphs or talk about each one individually.
That's a lot of paragraphs, man.
Yeah. So I thought what I might do is just talk about it in terms of some of the basic themes and ideas that I got out of it, and then please interrupt if you have any thoughts as well. But what he's getting at is there's obviously the church over time continues to reform the liturgy, come to new understandings of what the liturgy is all about. The reason why we have a mass in the first place, why is mass so important in the life of the church? And we've all obviously been going to mass since we were, quite young. So we've all had, 40 plus years experience in our lives of mass and of liturgy, combined ages. How about we go with that then, Caroline? Yeah.
Better.
Yeah. Caroline's only had 21 years of experience. The rest of it, yeah.
Yes,
all right.
thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank
Yeah. Walked into that one, didn't I? Yes. Yeah. So the thing is, in our overall life experience, that each of us, our understanding and our connection with liturgy has changed, and its meaning and what it's all for. And I've spoken before about, for example, earlier this year, I spoke about the importance of the Word of God in liturgy, the reason, Scripture in liturgy and connecting that way. And I don't want to tread over old ground. I just want to basically talk about some of the key points that I thought were pretty important from Pope Francis. Pope Francis has been working on the liturgy a lot as well. So he, some of the background is that in 1960, 62 to 65, I think that's, some historian can correct me on this. However, the Second Vatican Council was a really important gathering of church leaders, where they got together and talked about how the church can exist in the modern world. How can the church reconnect, talk to people in the modern world, and bring the message of the good news of Christ to a world that was changing a lot, especially in the 60s. The world was changing a lot. modernizing, new technologies, all kinds of things. And so the church was trying to tap into the joys and hopes, the fears and anxieties of the world at the time, and say the church is here, Jesus is here in these times, as Jesus has been through all of history. One of the documents that was produced by the Second Vatican Council was called Sacrosanctum Concilium, which was all about the liturgy, and it was about looking forward to reforming the liturgy. So that the last reforms liturgy was from the Council of Trent, and it's what we would we'd call it now the extraordinary form or the Latin Mass. I don't know if you've been to one or seen one or heard about one, but the Latin Mass looks different. It has a basic formula that's similar to what we understand now, but the Latin Mass looks very different to what all of us, we grew up in the current form of the Mass, so it's different to our understanding. I've been to one, like Latin Mass. I was invited to one years ago, so I went. So I've had a chance to see what it's like. Yeah,
I've just been to one as well.
Yeah,
I haven't been to one yet.
And in our life experience, not going to one is normal because again, we live in the time of the latest ordinary form of the Mass. So in any church historians, you can correct me on this, but 1969, I think it was when Pope Paul VI enacted the desire for a reforming of the rubrics of the liturgy, and released the missal, the 1969 missal, which is what we use now. So the Mass, the Mass that we have now, the ordinary form as it's called, is the one that we participate in now, and popes after Pope Paul VI have made subtle changes. For example, one of the biggest changes that we would know is the changing of some of the language of the Mass. So, for example, peace be with you, we used to say, and also with you. Now we say, and with your spirit. So the language became more liturgical, more spiritual in some places, sometimes more confusing. Like people were really hung up on consubstantial. That was a hard one to get around because
I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, consubstantial
yes,
we used to say one in being with the Father in the creed. Now we say consubstantial. It's a theological term.
For some reason, I can't even remember the older.
Yeah, I'm actually forgetting some of the old language as well now. But and sometimes I accidentally revert to some of the old language by accident.
At times it's me too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But everyone knows. I mean, the important thing is now, like everyone knows that if someone says, "May the force be with you," we say, "and with your spirit," not "and also with you."
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's the correct way to do it.
Yeah, that's correct. You won't see that in any church rubrics, but I mean, it's a cultural thing that we understand.
You might sometimes.
Yeah. When some Star Wars language enters liturgical life, that's the proper response. Anyway, we know that.
Exactly. Glad we cleared that up.
Glad we cleared that up. Yeah. That's fundamental to our spiritual life. But getting back on track, so now Pope Francis has continued to implement, because what they say is when a church council happens, it takes, half a century to a century to fully implement it. And it takes subsequent generations, subsequent popes to continue, making tweaks and changes, and not for the sake of change, not change for its own sake, but for the sake of the people to access what the thing that is being changed, what it's actually all about. And in this case, the liturgy. Pope Francis released a motu proprio, which is like a direction from the Pope, I think it was called Traditionis Custodius. Someone will correct me on that. And that was establishing that the universal form of the Mass is the ordinary form, because there have been, and again, like now, if you're a Latin Mass goer or a person who loves the Latin Mass, this is not a dig at you, so please don't see it that way. But there had been movements in the church where people, which were promoted mostly by lay people and certain lay apostolates, who had sort of overemphasized the Latin Mass as well. Said, this is the Mass that we should be going to. This is the Mass, that matters. The ordinary form is not a good Mass. And some of these apostolates would even say the ordinary form that we go now is just a Protestant version of the old Mass. So these sort of, I personally think that some of these things that were being said were kind of getting a bit out of hand. Especially if you look on the internet, you know what I mean? It's like, it was getting out of hand. And you know what? It creates confusion for ordinary Catholics as well. This is the problem. if you're an ordinary mass going Catholic who wants to do the right thing and suddenly you're being told, oh, the mass you're going to is not valid, or the mass you're going to is not good, you should be going to a Latin. That's not fair, is it? That disturbs the spiritual life of people. And again, I want to make a big distinction between people who say that and people who authentically go to a Latin mass because that's where they get their spirituality. I want to make a big distinction between that. There's no criticism there. So Pope Francis released that letter to say, look, the ordinary form is the form that we have now. Saint Pope Paul VI, Latin rite of the Mass. That's what we do now. We call it the Latin rite, the Latin Church. And special permissions now need to be set up for the Latin Mass, as in the old or the extraordinary form, or the Council of Trent form of Mass. That needs special permission from the Vatican to continue to run now in dioceses around the world. Archbishop Peter Comensoli, when that letter had come out, he'd said, this is only going to affect a small number of Catholics in the Archdiocese of Melbourne. And, that's been sorted out and implemented as it had to. So that's my long introduction to get to where we are now with Pope Francis's latest letter. So the previous one, the Traditionis Custodius, I'm sure I got that wrong. That was addressed to bishops. And the latest letter has been addressed to, it says, bishops, priests, deacons, consecrated men and women, and the laity, which is us. So it's a letter about the liturgy for all of us. So I'm only going to give a short discussion of it and then get you guys to chime in. So you ready for this? Here we go. Get your seatbelts on because I'm going to take us through the Mass. Yeah, here we go. Clicked in. So essentially what Pope Francis is trying to tell us is that the Mass is the way that we encounter Christ in a very special kind of way, and not just through the Eucharist. The Eucharist is obviously one of the central things that we do in Mass, but all of salvation history, from the moment of creation to the fall, the understanding of the fall of Adam and Eve, and the restoration of our relationship with God. It culminates in the liturgy. It's expressed. The liturgy contains all of the theology of the church, he says, and all of the understandings of Christ, the Christ who is incarnated, his paschal mystery, whose life, death, and resurrection was all about our salvation. It's all found prepackaged, and expressed in the Mass. That's where we find how we are saved, through Christ. And all of us are invited to the Mass, he says. It's an invitation to all. And what he says is not everyone has received this invitation, because that's the evangelical mission of the church. And he says that he says the church needs today to have a missionary impulse. What is the expression of church? It is to take the mission of the church to, and he talks about in previous letters, that to the edges of society. Take that mission to everyone, and let them know that they are invited, whether they accept the invitation or not. At least the invitation should be given. And who gives the invitation of the church, of Christ's invitation to come into church and to find salvation in the Mass and whatever? Us. We're led by the Spirit. We're the ones who share that invitation. And that invitation might be shared through a podcast, hint, through your everyday meetings and witnessing of your faith with people in your workplaces, through the witnessing of faith to our children and to our spouses, all those kinds of things. In our parishes, the invitation is given over and over again. But it's not just the priest who does this or the bishops who do this, but it's also us as baptized who also share that missionary impulse as well. The Catholic Church in Australia is discussing this question at a plenary council right now. The plenary sessions are happening as we podcast, and we'll say more about that in our next episode or a couple of episodes down the track when I've had a chance to look at the outcomes of that. But the whole church, even the synod on synodality, is all about how do we share this missionary impulse, or how do we energize this missionary impulse so that the invitation of Christ into the church is being shared with the world as well. And the Mass is all of that message wrapped up into one. When we accept the invitation, we naturally gravitate towards the Mass, and we find God speaking to us about our salvation through the Mass. So that's me really, it's me paraphrasing Pope Francis's introduction there. And he says the church treasures that phrase of Jesus, "Do this in memory of me." That is to continue the Mass that he started. at the Last Supper. So do this in memory of me. And he says, so that the Mass doesn't become a vague memory. The Last Supper is not a vague memory in all that it means, but it's something that we enact now. So he says the liturgy then is an encounter, a place of encounter with Christ. First of all, he says the liturgy actually guarantees our encounter. If there's one place where we can be sure that we're encountering Jesus, it's when we are in the liturgy. And he says that it ensures that the Last Supper, like I said, is not a vague memory, but instead, in our presence there, we hear his voice, we eat his body, and we drink his blood. So that's the word and the sacraments put together. And he says this is how the salvation of God reaches us, just like the concrete encounters that Jesus had in his incarnation. So if you think of any Bible story, Jesus and Zacchaeus, today salvation has come to this house, or Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, or Jesus who heals the blind, Bartimaeus the blind man, or who raises Jairus' daughter. Think of all those, right? That's our encounter with all of those is actually found in its expression in the Mass. One guarantee that we have in our expression with Christ and all of those things that he did is through liturgy. So Pope Francis wants to emphasize that. He also says that in one of his previous letters in Evangelii Gaudium, which was all about the evangelizing work that we do in the church now, he said it's possible for us to fall into a kind of Gnosticism or Pelagianism. Basically, the attitude of I can do it all on my own. I don't need anyone else. I can learn my faith. My faith is, I don't need anyone else for my faith. I don't need to listen to anyone else. I know my faith. And we can fall into the trap of actually saying, I can do it all on my own. And our source of salvation becomes ourselves and not God. And we have to be careful of that. We have to be careful because any one of us can fall into that trap. I know everything. I don't need anything else. And we become a God in ourselves of our own. We know what I mean? We accidentally elevate ourselves above God. Sometimes people, there's that phrase of, you acting like you're more Catholic than the Pope. And that's a very crude way of putting it, but there's some truth in that phrase. You've got to be really careful sometimes. And he says the liturgy is the antidote to that kind of poison. And he calls it a spiritual worldliness. So he says the liturgy is an antidote to that. Because firstly, we put God first over ourselves when we go to Mass. It's a humble way of coming to God, putting ourselves before God. And the Mass means you have to be in communion with others as well. So what it means is you stop putting yourselves above everyone else because you're there with everyone else as well. Mass can only be understood through the sharing of Christ is present. We talk about Christ being present in the Word, with the priest, and also in the people as well. So we're encountering Christ by praying together, by doing the responses together, by sharing the sign of peace, going to communion together, all those things. We only do it with everyone else present there. So Mass is a communal exercise as well. So he wants everyone to rediscover the theological beauty of the Mass. And I'm going to just move towards the end of the document now, because a lot of the document also talks about the formation of so the education about the Mass, so that people, the laity, need to be educated continuously about what the Mass is and why we go there. That we are encountering our salvation through Christ in the Mass. Well, it's so important for us to understand that, again, by hearing, by understanding, and so on. So he says that education needs to continue. And one of the ways for that education to continue is to ensure the proper education of seminarians as well, who will enter into the priesthood, and the continuing formation of priests too. That when they do the Mass, there are some things that need to be understood. Firstly, we have the rubric of the Mass, that is the form of the Mass, how all the parts of the Mass that happen. And he says the rubric needs to be followed. Needs to be understood and followed. However, the rubric itself doesn't guarantee that the message of Christ is being heard by the people. So he said, for example, we have to make sure that priests wear the right vestments. We have to make sure the right prayers are said. We have to make sure the right, instruments are used, whatever it might, and the right things are used in the Mass. It's all defined in the rubric and so on. He said, but just following the rubric is not enough. It's also in, he said, for example, the different things that the different prayers that the priest says, he says, even the inflection of their voice is important. that they express it carefully.
Yes, true.
So for example, it could be the way that a homily is preached. It's the way that the Eucharistic ritual is shared, so that it's not just it's not just done robotically. Things like the emphasis on, and this is one that that gets me sometimes as well. So when a priest says, "Let us pray," there should actually be a short pause for everyone, for all of us to pray together. There's the,
wow, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So for example, at the beginning of Mass, there's what's called the collect, right? Which is where the priest will say, let us pray. And the collect is literally that. It is all of us praying and all of our prayers being collected and being shared before the next part of the Mass goes on. All of our prayers being shared in the opening prayer. So all of that correct emphasis, so that people understand that they're not just going to a robotic ritual. And when I say robotic, that's not the priest. I mean robotic in the sense that everyone just does their part and then leaves after an hour. So that what they're doing is participating in the salvation that Christ has for us. So again, going back to knowing that in Luke 22, when Jesus says, I've earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer, is that these words were not just for his apostles at the Passover. These words are for us now, that Jesus earnestly desires to share, for us to share in the Mass with him, because the Mass that we enter into is not a repeat or a copy of, when Jesus says, "Do this in memory of me," it's not a copy of what he did. We're actually doing the Mass that he did at the Last Supper. That Mass is the only Mass that's ever existed in the history of the world. It's a once and for all. And when we say, when we participate in Mass, we're actually participating in the Last Supper. That's what we're doing. So that Mass that Jesus does at the Last Supper is not a once-off, not just a historical event. It's also a theological event, a spiritual event that the Holy Spirit brings to us when we participate in Mass as well. So we are participating in the Last Supper. So that's again another way that we're encountering Christ as well. So the formation of laity and priest in Mass is really, really important. And there are just two other things I want to talk about as well. One is that he said, I'm going to take Pope Francis's words here, and he says it's the importance of laity understanding the power of symbols, because he believes that the loss of the understanding of of symbols is one of the reasons why people might distance themselves from the Mass. So he says the following. He says, here there is outlined the first task of work of liturgical formation. People must once again be capable of understanding symbols. And he says, this is a responsibility for all, for ordained ministers and the faithful alike. The task is not easy because modern man has become illiterate, no longer able to read symbols. It is almost as if their existence is not even suspected. This happens also with the symbol of our body. Our body is a symbol because it is an intimate union of soul and body. It is the visibility of the spiritual soul in the corporeal order. And in this consists human uniqueness, the specificity of the person, irreducible to any other form of living being. Our openness to the transcendent, to God, is constitutive of us. Not to recognize this leads us inevitably not only to a not knowing of God, but also to not knowing ourselves. It is enough to look at the paradoxical way in which the body is treated, in one moment cared for, in an almost obsessive way, inspired by the myth of eternal youth, and in another moment reducing the body to a materiality to which there is denied every dignity. The fact is that value cannot be given to the body starting only from the body itself. Every symbol is at the same time both powerful and fragile. If it is not respected, if it is not treated for what it is, it shatters, loses its force, and becomes insignificant. So he uses our understanding that the body is a symbol, first of all, to say, if we can't understand the symbolism of our bodies, that the idea that our body is a gift given to us from God and is precious and is the means of our salvation as well. The church quotes in the Catechism, Tertullian, I think it is, who says the flesh is the hinge of salvation. He says, if we can't comprehend symbols, then how can we understand, firstly, why God gave us bodies and why we have symbols in Mass to help us understand God too? So, for example, one obvious symbol that stands out to me is the bread and the wine before it's consecrated. So, one thing I tell my family, and one thing I think we should do, is pay attention to the ritual of lay people bringing the bread and the bread and wine to the priest, and what these are. First of all, the bread and the wine come from the earth, don't they? As the liturgy says, it's the work of our hands, the work of human hands. Blessed are you, Lord of God of creation, for your goodness we have this bread to offer. The work of human hands. Yeah, fruit of the vine is the grapes or the wine. Anyway, I'm mixing words up here, but the point is that two things. First of all, blessed are you, Lord God of all creation. God created everything we need in order to access God, including symbols. The bread and wine that we create comes from God's creation, God's created earth. The earth is so precious for so many reasons. One of the spiritual reasons the earth is so precious is because it contains all the symbols we need to understand God. So think of, for example, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, right? Sorry about this. The very end, Rey is speaking to Princess Leia, right? Spoiler alert, right? And she looks around the room, right? And she sees, the resistance has been reduced to everyone who can fit in the Millennium Falcon, right? And she says to Princess Leia something, and I'm going to misquote this very badly, paraphrase it. But she's like, how are we going to continue? How are we going to rebuild? And Princess Leia looks down at the broken lightsaber in Rey's hands, and she says, "We have everything we need." You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. God has given us everything we need to understand our salvation and to worship God too. So symbols are really important. So the bread and the wine is taken in procession to Christ. What Christ has already given us is offered back to Christ, who is there in the presence of the priest. The priest is in persona Christi, the person of Christ. So there's another symbolic presence right there. The priest is like another Christ for us in as much as he is, doing what it is that Christ told us to do. Do this in memory of me. So he's following on that instruction. And then when he says the words and consecrates and lays hands on it and so on, it's consecrated, becomes the body and blood of Christ. So it's no longer a symbol in one sense, in the sense that it's not just symbolic of Christ, but it is also a symbol at the same time because it's symbolic of Christ at the same time. So it's both symbolic of Christ's presence and is Christ's presence at the same time. And we no longer call it bread and wine, but we call it the body and blood of Christ. And then it's given back to us. We've given it. Christ has changed it and given it back to us so that we can commune with Christ. So the Mass has a ton of symbols, and we don't need to know all the symbols at once, but there are a ton of symbols for us to comprehend in the Mass too. So I'll finish up because there is so much more that he says in this letter, and I'm going to end up taking us, into, we're going to go way, way over time. But he says also that there's also power in the gestures and symbolic actions that we do as well. So he says every gesture is important. So think about when we kneel, and when we stand, and when we shake hands, and when, and when we get out of our seat and walk up to, to receive Christ in the Eucharist, everything we do and everything we say has a powerful symbolic meaning as well. And so we should try and access the understanding of those symbols. So finally, he says, as I've already written, I intend that this unity be reestablished in the whole Church of the Roman Rite. So the reason why he's making a big emphasis on the Mass is to restore any unity that's been damaged, to grow the unity of everyone, to make us all one as Christ desires. I desire that they all be one, and he wants us to do that too. And he says the Sunday celebration offers to the Christian community the possibility of being formed by the Eucharist. From Sunday to Sunday, the word of the risen Lord illuminates our existence, wanting to achieve in us the end for which it was sent. From Sunday to Sunday, communion in the body and blood of Christ wants to make also of our lives a sacrifice pleasing to the Father in the fraternal communion of sharing, of hospitality, of service. From Sunday to Sunday, the energy of the bread broken sustains us in announcing the gospel, in which the authenticity of our celebration shows itself. So let us abandon our polemics. A polemic is like, angry words back and forth and criticism and so on. So let us abandon our polemics to listen together to what the Spirit is saying to the Church. Let us safeguard our communion. Let us continue to be astonished at the beauty of the liturgy. The Paschal mystery has been given to us. Let us allow ourselves to be embraced by the desire of that the Lord continues to have to eat his Passover with us. All this under the gaze of Mary, Mother of the Church. So that was a lot. and I've barely summarized because there are other things. He talks about being astonished or amazed by the Mass as well in a particular way. There's a few other things, but I recommend that people read it. And there are some good summaries because some of the language, some of the theology is a bit heavy in there as well. But there are some good articles that have been written about it as well, about why we should understand it and try to understand this letter and what Pope Francis is saying to us as well. So, Caroline, I'll start with you. Any reactions, responses to what Pope Francis is trying to help us understand about the Mass?
Yeah, I think that, this letter kind of makes us reflect on what the Mass is, So like, what's the important thing about the Mass? Like, and for me, just reflecting on what Jesus said to the apostles, I greatly desire to share this meal with you, to have this meal with you, because he knew he was about to give his life for them and for all of us. And he had a burning desire. This was what his mission was all about. This is what it's all come to. This last sharing of this meal. And he wanted us to know that do this in memory of me. Remember what I'm going to do for you. They may not have understood right there and then, but they would have understood afterwards. And now we have the full knowledge of what that was all about. And I think this is the real thing we really need to remember. Whatever language you celebrate Mass in, as long as you remember what is Mass about? Why do we celebrate it? They celebrate it in a Passover setting, and then afterwards the Mass was developed with the sharing, with us taking Jesus into ourselves, because he gave himself, God connecting directly with us through a physical and spiritual means. This is what it's all about. And that's what I'm getting from what you're saying. And I've reflected on about this myself when I've heard people saying, oh, you say it in this language, you celebrate it this way. As long as you celebrate, the way we are supposed to celebrate, according to the rubrics, and just remembering, what it's about. We don't need to bicker. Let's just celebrate Jesus the way he wanted us to do it, because that is the only important thing. I mean, many people celebrate it in many different languages all around the world. There may be little bits of cultural influences.
Yes, and with cultural, embedded within the culture, correct, yes. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But the main thing is we're pointing to Jesus, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea of it. So, and those words have always, the words of Jesus have always struck me when I every time I hear, I greatly desire to share this Passover meal with you. And I just feel that intention in those words, and that's what came to mind when you were speaking. Yeah.
I think Pope Francis would like your summary of his letter. Yeah. Maybe better than mine too. It's a nice short. Yeah.
Not at all.
And now you've given me something to think about. Like, imagine if we all went to Mass thinking of Jesus saying, I've greatly desired to share, this meal with you. Thinking about, but as a reflection of before going to Mass, it's not just an obedient thing that we do, but it's Jesus greatly desired to share this with us. For one reason, to again show us this is your salvation. This is how much God loves you. This is how much I love you and want to save you. And you can find it right here in my presence here with me. And Pope Francis says that, like you said, Caroline, that presence is concrete in the Mass. That's why we have Mass. Yeah, Lino, what are your thoughts?
Changing of the Mass it took me and a few I think some of my family members a while to get used to the especially the wording of the of what the Mass was going through. Is I believe the Apostles' Creed?
Yeah,
the one that's been changed.
We've gone from we believe to I believe. Yes.
That's correct. There's
I believe.
Little things. That's right. And and I think once we pray and say those prayers, I think I'm not saying it's robotic.
Yeah.
I think we know what it means, and with that, we just know how it is. And personally, I try to, when I pray, it's almost like singing. Not that I do sing, but you don't want me to sing. But anyway, I close my eyes to concentrate.
Yeah.
And also, if I am at Mass, I'll concentrate on the tabernacle and on the altar. The change of where the tabernacle is, was that part of the change as well, Lindsay?
No. So
have I asked this before?
I'm pretty sure it's always meant to be in a central place on the altar. Now,
right.
So I won't get into the arguments that people have over that, but I think generally it's meant to be on the altar anyway. I think I don't think central was the word that's used, but in a I don't know, there are words and I can't remember, but like in a respectful place, but it's meant to be somewhere up the front, in a place that gives it's the reverence that it's due. So generally, I mean, in a way, I mean, generally it's put behind the altar, in the middle, and that's because I think my understanding of the intention is that during Mass, the tabernacle ceases to be the focus and the altar becomes the focus, because the Eucharist happens on the altar. We gather around, like the Passover, right? The altar, again, is a powerful, important symbol. We gather around the altar, around the table, not for Passover, but for Jesus's, Passover, for Eucharist. So the altar, if you think about it, it's like all of us coming together to sit down for a meal. Now, that's a crude way of putting it, but the gathering, think of any time you gather around a table with someone, it's important, right? It's powerful. It's a powerful experience for whatever reason. The altar is the table that we gather around. There's symbolism in that too.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was my long answer to your short question. Yep.
All good.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. The changes on the Mass haven't been so drastic. Oh, this is coming from a personal view.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they're going to change nothing too major. They're not going to change the Hail Mary or the Our Father.
There's not going to be anything.
That will just totally be there for a very, very long time.
Yeah. And he's not talking about changes to the Mass here. He's talking about a deeper appreciation of it, a deeper understanding of how it connects to our spiritual life and our access to Jesus too. That he was mentioning that a lot. So with that, if anyone who's listening wants to tell us about their reading of the letter or their experience of Mass, go ahead. We'll share that as well. We'd love to hear it. All right, so let's move on. Caroline, I've got to throw it over to you. It's been a while, but let's talk about science.
What a fine day for science.
You have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Can you reverse the polarity?
I'll do my best.
All right, Caroline. Now this is exciting. So just as Jesus has been desiring to share this Passover with us, I've been excited for you to talk about this story. We've had a couple of just one at the moment, a rocket launch in Australia, and it's going to pave the way for more rocket launches. So Caroline, tell us all about it.
Okay, yeah, this is very exciting for Australia and space science. So I've headed it. NASA launches rocket from Northern Territory, Australia. So this is the first commercial space launch in Australia's history and the first launch for NASA from a commercial spaceport outside the United States.
Yay!
Very exciting.
So cool.
A NASA rocket launch on Australian soil.
I was so excited by this. This is so
amazing,
cool. Yeah.
Amazing. So the launch of a Black Brant 9 suborbital sounding rocket took place just after midnight on June the 27th from Arnhem Space Centre in the Northern Territory. This space centre is located on Dupamar Plateau, just outside the town of Nhulunbuy, and it's owned and operated by Equatorial Launch Australia. It's actually a newly constructed facility and it's located just 12 degrees from the equator, which means the launch vehicles actually get a bit of leverage into the Earth's rotation and gain extra velocity, which...
Bit of a kick.
Yeah, which It does, and it helps to cut costs a bit by improving the payload to fuel ratio of the craft. So the launch itself, okay, so it had been delayed a little bit due to rain and wind, but eventually it managed to launch, and the launch was surrounded by a lot of excitement, as heard by the eventual countdown and the cheers during the launch. Now, did you guys watch the coverage of this?
I watched the last
the guy
couple
was like
of
10, 9, 8, and then at the end he's like 3, 2, 1, like he couldn't contain himself. Okay, it was great. Awesome. And then I saw an interview on the ABC News and excitement all around. Okay, it was really, really cool. So they had 75 personnel from NASA present, as well as other scientists, politicians, local community members, and Indigenous leaders. They all watched from about 800 meters away from the viewing platform.
And they did obtain permission to launch, so from the Indigenous elders of the land as well. Which is awesome. Yes, there's a big cooperation with everyone to make this happen.
Exactly. And so let's talk a little bit about the mission itself. So the suborbital rocket flew up to about 300 kilometers above the Earth, and the equipment went up. I mean, the rocket went up, and then the equipment itself then just came down because it did a bit of a sample and then came down, and it parachuted safely back to the ground about southwest of the launch site. It carried an X-ray quantum calorimeter, which will allow the scientists from the University of Michigan to measure interstellar X-rays and to understand the interstellar medium. Now, the interstellar medium is the material that fills the space between the stars. This is something we don't know too much about yet.
Oh, yeah.
And the influence on the structure and evolution of the galaxies and stars. This is the first of 3 launches. So there's 2 other launches that have been carried out between the 27th of June and then the final one will be on the 12th of July. The 2 other missions will be focusing on Alpha Centauri A and B, and which are 2 of the 3 Alpha Centauri systems that are closer to our sun. The missions will allow for information about how the star's light can influence planets' habitability. Now, the second mission that's going to be launched, I'm going to read this straight off NASA site, is the suborbital imaging spectrograph for transition region irradiance from nearby exoplanets, host stars, or Cystine. And this is from the University of Colorado Boulder.
Cystine. Yes,
that's the short. It's very good. I love these.
Yeah.
It's targeted for 4th of July, and it will study how ultraviolet light from the stars affects the atmospheres of planets around them, which is a pretty cool thing to study, and including the gases thought to be signs of life. The third mission is targeted for July 12th, and it's a dual-channel extreme ultraviolet continuum experiment, or DUCE, from the University of Colorado Boulder as well.
Cool.
And it will measure so far unstudied part of the extreme ultraviolet light spectrum. These measurements are needed to model stars similar and smaller than our sun, as well as understand the effects on planetary atmospheres. So pretty cool. And just as a side note, why are they launching here? Because the studies can only be carried out in the southern hemisphere because the targets can't actually be seen in the northern hemisphere by NASA.
The Aussie
and that's
advantage.
why they're doing them here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love
yes.
it.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about the Indigenous people before, I have a little bit. I thought I should mention their participation as well. So the Arnhem Space Centre has been built on the lands of the Indigenous Yolngu people, and they are the traditional custodians and the landowners of this area. The great thing is that they were actually involved in helping to build the Arnhem Space Station on their land.
Brilliant.
Space Centre.
It's good.
Yep.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And so opportunities are actually being provided for them, and they're going to be taking part in future launches and projects and retrieving rocket modules when they return to Earth.
Yeah.
The Gumaj Corporation Chair, so Gumaj is, I've looked it up, and it's actually, the website shows that this corporation tries to build up businesses for the local people so the local Indigenous people can take part in employment.
Excellent.
And helping to better their lives and, just have opportunities for them that perhaps they may not have otherwise. And they also have a community resources for people around the area, such as things like schooling, meals, laundry, and all of that. So it's the idea is that they can have a better quality of life, just like everybody else in the country. So the chairman, Pawa Yunupingu, said that the space industry can provide opportunities for the Yolngu people, he says. We want our young people to see and take up jobs and business opportunities that come from the growth of the Arnhem Space Centre over time. So I love this. It's a collaboration between, Indigenous people of our land. They have such a connection to the stars already and to the astronomy, and they get to take part in science with NASA. How awesome is that? That's such a wonderful, collaboration. So I thought that was a happy note to end it on there.
We had Uncle Michael on our podcast.
Yes.
Was it? No, it was last year, wasn't it? Hang on.
Last year.
Yeah, it was last year. That's right. Yeah, and he was part of our discussion with him was about his understanding of Indigenous astronomy and how they were doing astronomy well before it was developed as a science.
Exactly.
So relied on the stars and things. So yeah, there's that long connection. Caroline, there's another awesome mission that Rocket Lab. I love this one.
Oh.
Rocket Lab went to the moon. Wow, they're going to the moon in a sense.
That was what a launch that was.
It was so good. That one got me really excited. That for me is, apart from this Australian one, this is one of the big launches of. So there are some big things happening this year, hopefully. Anyway,
Yes.
So Artemis from NASA is hopefully launching. This is their big moon rocket. Will hopefully launch later this year in August, I think is the plan now.
Oh, I'm hanging out.
Yeah. SpaceX at some point will launch Starship. Could be any point now. They've got their final approvals and now they're just doing their testing campaign and it will go. So that's a big one. Obviously Australia, and there might be another Falcon Heavy. That's the Falcon 9, but with 3 boosters. That could be.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But this one from Rocket Lab cannot be overlooked because this is, in a way, paving the way to the moon too. I forgot what was it called? Capstone. I forgot what it was called
Capstone.
now. Capstone,
That's
which is an
one,
acronym for something, but this with this mission, it was launched from New Zealand. It was only a couple of days ago at time of recording.
We watched it together, didn't we?
Yeah, we were all watching it, which is cool. Yeah. By the time this podcast comes out, they would have already done their last engine burn from the Curie engine from their the Photon spacecraft that they have, and that. And it's already on its way to the moon now by the time of recording.
What a little machine that thing is. It's so good.
And that spacecraft and the equipment on it is the size of a microwave, basically.
Yeah.
So they're going to...
It's tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny as, So when it launched, it was set for a 6-day orbit of the Earth. And the orbit was getting wider and wider. And just before we started podcasting, I was looking at... is it Peter Beck? He's the CEO, I think, of Rocket Lab. I follow him on Twitter, and he was saying that it was currently about 60,000 something kilometers above the Earth, so that the orbit is widening and widening.
Awesome.
And now they're going to do their
exciting.
Oh, so cool, yeah. And so at time of recording, that it's going to get timey-wimey now, but at time of recording. Tomorrow, which is Sunday, they're doing their final engine burn to send it on its what is it, trans-lunar injection? Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Which is where it will be on its course towards the moon. Now, it's actually going to take a while, and it's not going to get into that orbit of the moon until November. So we might think of like the Saturn V mission, Apollo missions, we went 3 days to the moon. But this is a very different kind of mission. So by November, it will reach orbit. But the orbit won't be like a standard orbit for Star Trek standard orbit, but it won't be like a normal orbit like what you would think of when you think of satellites orbiting. It's going to be in a something halo orbit. Anyway, it's kind of like think of it more like an elliptical orbit, so like an oval shape rather than a circle.
Oh,
if you want to put it that way.
Circle around the planet just is like an oval.
Yeah. So what would happen is its closest pass by the moon will be about, I think, 1,000 or so miles, which translates to 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. And then it goes on a really wide orbit, and then it kind of comes back again. And the reason why they're doing this is because they're testing the physics, because this is the point between the moon and Earth where the gravity of both should actually hold it in that orbit, holds objects in that orbit. Yeah. And the reason for that is like a pathway or a pathfinder for the Gateway space station, which is the space station that NASA, through the Artemis missions, will eventually put the modules for that into orbit. And that space station will then be used for people to dock with, astronauts, I should say, to dock with, and then from there to then go to the moon and then back again, land on the moon. So it's a very complex, a very cool operation, but this little I shouldn't even call it a little company in New Zealand. It's quite, it's getting quite big now in what it's doing.
Yeah, it is doing big things.
Yeah, but the work that they're doing is in cooperation with NASA. It's a NASA mission to to lay down ground for future moon landings, which is really cool. I love it.
Super cool.
Yeah, so we'll share more about that. And Caroline, I wanted to share a final science piece as well. Earlier in the year, I think it was when Lino and I were, it was a science segment I did with Lino, I think from memory, when Lino and I did an episode. We talked about a mysterious piece of space junk, an old booster rocket that was going to collide with the moon.
Yeah, for the moon. Yeah.
Yeah. So that happened in March, March or May, as was discussed.
March 4th, I think they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So it did happen. It did collide with the moon.
Yeah.
They still don't know who it belongs to.
No.
So it crashed into the moon and left two small craters.
Yeah. And they can't hide it. It's got Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Yeah.
Taking photos of the moon.
Of the crater,
not going to be missed,
And they don't know who it belongs to. So the theories are, the leading theories is that...
No one's putting their hands up.
No one's saying it was me, The leading theories are that it could be a SpaceX booster, or it could be from a Chinese rocket.
It left a double crater as well, which is unusual.
Yeah, and so they're saying if it left a double crater, it was actually quite big, lending more credence to the theory that this is a Chinese rocket, but they don't know. So no one's owning up. Yep. No. But whoever you are, we will find out soon enough. We will know. Yeah. So you might as well put your hand up. It's like with children when they do something naughty, right? It's like, we're going to find out later, so you might as well tell us now.
No more rocket launches until somebody puts their hand up.
Yeah,
exactly.
We are putting you in timeout until we find out who it was. Yeah. So we will know. Yeah.
So someone just crashed something on the moon.
I find it disconcerting that just random things you can just fire them from the Earth and they can just crash into the moon. Like it's a bit like
be concerned about that.
Taking liberties sort of thing. I just feel like trashing the moon, just like random trash going into the moon.
Yeah, that's what
you want to try and keep it as pristine as possible.
What goes around comes around.
And then smashes into the moon.
Come down.
Yeah,
it's like
Yeah, that's the part I don't like about it. Just this,
exactly.
No one owning up to it.
Do we have rogue space places, companies doing this, Caroline? Are there rogue?
It could be official rogue companies. Companies that are official but are not owning up.
Yeah, now, NASA has owned up and said that in the past some of their old boosters and things have crashed into the moon. That's a known thing. Yeah, but anyway, we will find out.
Ooh. They will find out.
In the words of Liam Neeson, I will find you.
Space police are coming.
Maybe Pace is it.
Space police.
Yeah.
All right. So
it's a bit scary. No.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Caroline. I love a bit of space science is always a lot of fun and very exciting developments. Happening.
That was awesome.
I love that, and I love the science behind it. I would love to learn about the results that they find because those are pretty exciting. Pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. It happened in the nighttime, Caroline. It was a day. I'm not saying the day will be look.
Yeah, no, it was midnight when they launched that one.
It was like just blast. Good away.
Yeah.
And now here it is. I'm going to make this official on the podcast. Bucket list. I want to go see one. I want to go see an Aussie rocket launch.
There were people who actually did drive up to go and watch it. Everything was booked around. So if you know of one in advance, you have to book early.
Yeah. Oh, how exciting. All right, well, let's move on and let's do a brief because we are going way over time today. So you got lots to get off our chest,
I know. That's what happens when we don't podcast for a while.
Let's do a whip around the group. What's entertaining us lately? Caroline, what have you been entertained by? What's worth having a look at?
Okay, so just briefly, I will mention two things actually. So I was watching while in New Zealand because I can't get it here because I have to subscribe to another one of these streaming apps.
No.
In New Zealand, they were streaming for free on TVNZ Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, great show.
Oh, really?
Great show.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely worth it. It's great stories, great acting, just great everything about it. It's the kind of Star Trek I can watch. I just really enjoy. So fantastic. Highly recommended. I even recommended it to my parents-in-law because they were wondering what to watch next. And I'm like, well, watch the Star Trek. Yeah. And my mother-in-law's like, I don't know. I said, look, if I like it, you're going to like it. So I'm not sure if they started it, but yeah. And then the other one, which is something I normally wouldn't, this kind of thing I normally wouldn't watch, but I was intrigued because it's starring Renee Zellweger, and it's something that she normally wouldn't do. Normally she's in a chick flick or something, but I saw the way her acting on the TV commercial. It's There's Something About Pam. Now, it's a story based on real life, unfortunately, but it is a story about a woman who commits a few murders basically to get money or to hide her crimes and whatever. And it's just the character that Renee Zellweger plays. She plays her so well, and they've written it really well. I recommend, if you can handle watching, about murder, about a woman committing murder, like the whole story about it. The thing that's hard about it is that it really happened. Like it was based on true story. But the way they did it was fantastic. The storytelling's really well. Everybody acted really well. They tried to make it kind of a little bit quirky and fun, but the bottom line, and it does get a little dark in places.
Of course.
But it is watchable. I'd watch it without children because of the topic, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it's great. It's not your like Poirot or Agatha Christie's murder mysteries, that kind of thing. It's very
Murder, She Wrote.
Murder, She Wrote. It's a very American style series, which their perspective is, they've got another perspective, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So yes, that's what I just finished watching. Our mum watched it too because I said, "Oh, you should watch it." Yeah, you got mum
into it. Yeah.
And she watched all of it, and I don't know if she liked it or not, but she got a lot out of it. We had a lot of discussion about it, which is good because when you generate discussion, I mean, it highlights a few differences between when you have a good lawyer, when you have a bad lawyer, when everybody assumes something about you, and you may not have done something, but everyone assumes you're guilty, and the person who really did it got away, and it's just a whole story. So I think it's worth a watch for sure.
Yeah, I might watch it with Isabel at some point.
I think Isabel enjoy it, so I reckon you guys will enjoy watching it. Yeah,
we are. I think we've just finished one. I'll talk about it in a sec. We finished one series and ready for a new one. Lino, how about you? What have you been watching? Anything recently?
Yeah, so we finished F1.
Yes, you've been Netflix.
Night.
Yeah.
We didn't like the ending, but that's beside the point. That's our personal view. But we didn't like the ending. But it was a good show. Good show.
Great story, too many cars.
Great story, too many cars. Yeah, so many things going. Like I keep on saying on the podcast, it's like so many things going on back and forth.
Yes,
and people, But that's a good thing about F1 is you're not just seeing a car just drive, which is pretty cool. It's pretty good. They got about 300 k's an hour. But that was a good show actually. Good show. And of course, that was last season, 2021.
Yeah.
So of course we'll wait for this season. Of course they'll keep on going until how many seasons they can do.
Round and round.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry, I had to put that in.
No. Yeah, I like that one.
Monotonous, isn't it?
Very good. Monotonous. Yeah.
Thank you, Looney Tunes, for that line.
Yes. We have a lot to Looney Tunes.
It's true. So watch that, and we watched the first episode of Stranger Things. Wow. Wow. I don't know if you guys have started watching that, but that's getting good. It's getting good again. So yeah, that's a good show. And I think everyone, both of us will know that we've all bought new computers.
Yep.
So I had to accident buy one. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes.
So I just built my one a couple of weeks. Gosh, a couple of weeks ago, and see how that goes. And it's been alright. Look, streaming is alright. It's been okay here. I was a bit concerned that we're going to use this new software. And we go, oh no, thank goodness I haven't upgraded to Windows 11. That's all I can say. Windows 11, not yet. I'll wait for it. Yeah, it's been good. It's been good for us. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So because it's been a while since you've podcasted, there's been quite a few things, so I won't go into everything. But yes, I've obviously been loving Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I saw episode 9 last night, so time of recording. Man, it's been so good just to have an original series era show that's just episode of the week. Interesting stories, told in the space of an hour. And my favorite of the modern Star Trek series by far, by a million miles. I'm really, really enjoying it.
It's very well done, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's about time they had I've always wanted a Captain Pike series, something along those lines. So it's good that they listened to the fans and did that. I've been watching the Orville, so
I watched that.
About 5 episodes in. What's interesting about season 3 is the tone has changed a lot. It's not so. The first season went a lot with the comedy thing. The second season kind of toned it down a little bit, but maintained it. The third season has a few. I would say there are no gags. There's just a couple of verbal jokes every now and then. Like in the first season, like the comedy would be things like, as a practical joke, Isaac the robot, who has no idea what practical jokes are, but has been tutored about how they work, because someone played a practical joke on him. He took all the parameters, and as a robot, he put all the parameters, took it all together, and his practical joke was to remove the leg of one of the crew members. Right, you know what I mean? It went from that kind of humor to there's just a couple of jokes. It's more
serious, didn't it?
It got serious, the thing is, I don't mind it. I know that Seth MacFarlane has wanted this to be more of a traditional Star Trek series anyway, like Star Trek like kind of series, because of his love of Star Trek. So it's got to that. I think it had to be advertised originally as a comedy, like a more like a Galaxy Quest kind of comedy, in order to get approved and not be perceived as a Star Trek ripoff.
Star Trek ripoff.
But now it's a Star Trek ripoff. Having said that though, they're going more with a thematic kind of approach. So it's the sci-fi that explores, the good old what it means to be human, and some it actually it's tackled some pretty heavy themes. I won't mention what they are because people have to watch it for themselves. Do I recommend it? Yeah, I think it's worth watching. I mean, you have to, it's not one I'd watch with my kids, like you were saying, Caroline, about the other show before.
It's a bit scary. I think what they've embraced a little bit. They're playing with themes a bit too, like a bit of horror in there as well.
Yeah,
like
a bit
one
of horror.
Episodes was and it's like, that one. It was like, oh God, I don't like horror. It was like, but I think, but it still keeps me watching.
Yeah, and the thing is though, I would say that it hasn't been too preachy, which is good. And I think that whatever messages that they get across, because there are some messages that are going to be challenging for us, it's worth just being able to say, all right, this is what they presented, and I can evaluate it on my own as an adult, which is good. I think that it's provoking in that way, and I've enjoyed that. It's been pretty good. What else? Oh, so Isabel and I, we watched The Wheel of Time together, which is on Amazon.
How's that?
So good, but not great, I'd say. So I enjoyed it, and there were some episodes that were better than others. But one thing I don't like about television shows is when they go, emotions will save us all. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm being too harsh. But sometimes it's like, it's the power of someone's emotion that saves the day, or it's the emotion that brings out the magic in a person and things like that. You know what I mean? That kind of bothers me sometimes when it gets a bit too emotional. Having said that, it is interesting, and I do want to watch the second season whenever it comes out. So there's a lot of when I was watching it, I'm like, wow, that's a lot like Lord of the Rings. Like that, there's a city just like Lord of the Rings. There's a character just like Lord of the Rings. There's a journey just like Lord of the Rings. Like almost every episode, I was saying to Isabel, just like Lord of the Rings. I was saying that to her a lot.
Maybe it's made by someone who loves Lord of the Rings and just
possibly, and interest. Now I know it's based on novels as well. And
it's
I've
a
heard,
huge big book, man. Yeah,
there's like 14 books in the whole series, and there's I know it's based on novels, and I know there was criticism of it because apparently they cut out a lot from the novels. Whatever. I've never read the novels. I've watched it as a series and enjoyed it, so that's okay. Yeah. I think it's enjoyable overall. A bit violent in places, probably. Isabel, like there'd be episodes where like it's pretty calm. Where it's quite calm, and then suddenly this violent thing, and Isabel like, whoa, that's a bit much. But yeah, that happened. Yeah, so again, wouldn't watch it with kids. Yeah, there are some themes in there, but pretty good overall. Some of the characters are likable, some of them are very annoying, but overall, yeah, it's done a pretty good job, I'd say. I would say, and people might disagree with me, I'd say it's not a top of the shelf fantasy kind of series, but if you like fantasy, I think you'd still enjoy it overall.
Cool. That's all real, guys. Is the new Lord of the Rings series coming out soon?
In September, I think, and I'm cautiously optimistic that that's going to be good. I hope it's good. Yeah.
Well, if they do base it on the book, it should have been I'm sorry, guys. I keep on saying it should have been a series maybe at the start, because the books, you know, guys, how many troubles they went through.
This isn't the Lord of the Rings trilogy, though, Lino. This is.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I think it's like 1,000 years before. So. Now, what I'm getting. So now, the reason why I'm getting this is a side story. I finished my essay, the last essay I was working on. One of the reasons we didn't podcast for a while. It's like 7,000 word essay.
10K or 7K this time.
7,000 this time. Yeah,
7K. Okay.
Stole a lot of my life. So to celebrate after I submitted it, I played some Xbox. Which I haven't done in ages. And the game I played on the Xbox was Lord of the Rings. Shadows of
Mordor? Yeah,
Shadows of Mordor, that's the one, yeah. And basically it's kind of like this story that could fit within the Lord of the Rings universe. But one of the things that does happen is that your main character in the opening of the game, they die, and suddenly their body is linked to the spirit of an elf called Celebrimbor, who was the elf who made the rings, including the One Ring. Right. Okay. So there's all these links, and what happens is part of the game is you find objects in the grounds which contain memories of this elf, and it goes to the forging of the rings as part of it, which is interesting. And then I just happened to be reading about the Amazon series and saw the name Celebrimbor, who's one of the characters. I hope I said that right. So I get the feeling this will be about the creation of the rings and then the first war of the ring as well. I feel like that's where it will probably head towards. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
As a side note, you know what's cool about New Zealand? I went to a movie theater because we saw the Lightyear movie, and there's like Lord of the Rings memorabilia everywhere. So real costumes and things like that. And it's like, wow, this is cool. It's like you go to the cinema, you're in a museum. So it's really cool.
What?
Yeah. They really have embraced that whole series. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And there's memorabilia. You'll find memorabilia. You'll go to places and they'll just have it there. It's like so good.
Yeah, everyone knows that because of Lord of the Rings, New Zealand's adopted name is actually Middle Earth. We know that.
It is Middle Earth. Yeah. It felt like very middle cold Earth, but yeah.
I can only imagine us. The only thing we could have is Mad Max. Oh, great.
Yeah, we don't want Australia, but yeah.
That's the only thing we have.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to have like post-apocalyptic Australia. We don't want people to think about that when they come here. Yeah,
But it's the only thing. Baz Luhrmann's don't even go to Australia.
Baz Luhrmann.
No, that movie. That's so bad.
I haven't seen that movie. Yeah, Australia.
No, don't. It's not worth.
Hugh Jackman.
Sorry, Lindsay. 2 hours of your life will just go. Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Lino gives that movie half a kangaroo. Yeah, out of 5. Yeah.
Half a gum leaf.
Half a gum leaf. Half a Hugh Jackman. Half a Hugh. Yeah. Yeah. All right. And a quarter of a Nicole Kidman. Yep. All right. All right. Let's roll on. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us for this extended episode 79 of the Catholics of Oz. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Catholics of Oz. Today, we'd love to thank Elliot B, Sean N, Greg O, Daniel S, and Ruben L. Through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give, they make it possible for the Catholics of Oz and all of the shows on StarQuest to continue. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. If you have any thoughts about our show today, we'd love to hear about them, and we'd love to share them as well. You can send us feedback by visiting sqpn.com/oz, where you can also find our links for things that we talked about in today's episode. SQPN has the Insiders Club newsletter where you get updates about the upcoming shows, and you can find that at sqpn.com/about/newsletter, and you can sign up there. If you'd love to talk to us directly, there are a couple of ways to do that. But one way to do that, the best way to do that at the moment is to go to SQPN's Discord channel and have a chat with us there. sqpn.com/Discord. There are channels for the Catholics of Oz and our other show, Let's Science, which is our science segment as a separate show. So if you'd like to talk about any of those, please do. We'd love to talk to you there. You can also find out more about our shows by visiting us at facebook.com/Catholics of Oz, spelt with an OZ at the end there. And don't forget that SQPN has its own Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or the handle @SQPN on Twitter. Caroline. Oh, actually, before I say Caroline, I should also mention we have an email address, catholicsofoz@SQPN. Now, Caroline, thank you so much for being part of the episode today and sharing your insights with us. Appreciate it.
It was fun. It was really fun to do this again with you guys.
Yes, it's great to be back again. And Lino, thanks for coming out of your box and joining us again. Now get back in there. Go. No, Wait, he can't because his cat is in the box now. But yes, for those who no one can see it, but we have a separate chat here. Lino's cat has been bothering him the whole time. So yeah, you can go and feed your cat right after this episode, Lino.
I think
I'll better do that before we
Yeah.
Okay, whoa, settle down.
My cat's meowing behind the door too. He gets very offended if I close the door. He's like meowing. I don't know if you can hear meows in the microphone.
Yeah.
But
that's how we know how to wind up the show. It's
Yeah.
when the cats start demanding that we finish recording so we can.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, thanks for having me, guys. It's been great to be together. So, what is this, Lindsay? What episode number is this?
79.
And we're going to turn 80 next time, guys.
That's right. Yeah.
Is
80th.
there a party? Is there a party? Come on, no party.
I'm sure
we'll have a party.
We'll have a party.
Cupcakes for everyone.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think the party should be gratitude for getting through the crazy 70s. It's been the hardest schedule for a podcast. Has been the 70s. Yeah.
The 70s. Yeah, those 70s, those years were crazy back in those days,
Yeah, so thank you all for listening to episode 79 of the Catholics of Oz. My name is Lindsay Sant, and we will see you next time.